Have you ever looked around your office or maybe thought back to a past job and wondered why that one incredibly brilliant person is just kind of stuck?
Oh, yeah, the genius who can't get promoted.
Exactly. I mean, the engineer or the analyst with this off-the-charts IQ who seems permanently trapped in middle management, they know the systems inside and out.
Right, they write flawless code or build these perfect financial models.
Yeah, but they hit this invisible ceiling. And meanwhile, you look at someone else with, maybe just average technical skills, and they're gliding effortlessly into leadership roles.
Winning over clients, getting the big bonuses, it's wild.
It's one of the most frustrating paradoxes of professional life. And if you're listening to this, you probably encountered that exact dynamic and wondered, well, what is the missing variable?
It is a phenomenal paradox, honestly. And it happens because we fundamentally misdiagnose what actually makes people successful.
That's
Well, in our modern data-driven world, we're obsessed with the visible stuff, right?
Hmm.
The measurable things. We look at degrees, certifications, lines of code, quarterly KPIs.
resume stuff.
Exactly. We assume that if you just stack up enough technical competencies, success is just a mathematical guarantee. But we completely ignore the invisible architecture of human behavior.
Which is exactly what we're dissecting today on this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're jumping into a foundational text that essentially wrote the blueprint for that invisible architecture.
A total classic.
Yeah, we're looking at Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Originally published way back in 1937, it is arguably the granddaddy of all personal development and business communication manuals.
It really is.
But our mission today isn't just to skim through a quaint list of historical rules. We're going to unpack the underlying psychology, the neurobiology, and the behavioral economics of what Carnegie termed human engineering.
Right, because we want to figure out why this text remains so universally applicable today.
Yeah, whether you're trying to close a high-stakes venture capital pitch or, de-escalate a tense project management meeting, or honestly, just survive a politically charged Thanksgiving dinner with your extended family.
I think we all need help with that last one, but right out of the gate, we do need to address the elephant in the room regarding that title.
Oh, the influence part.
Yeah, the phrase influence people often triggers immediate skepticism. People hear that and they picture this slick, Machiavellian salesperson using cheap psychological tricks.
Like manipulating someone into buying a lemon of a used car.
Exactly.
Right.
But when you actually immerse yourself in the source material, it becomes abundantly clear that Carnegie is demanding the exact opposite of manipulation.
It's not about being fake at all.
No, not at all. He is calling for a profound, genuine shift in how we orient ourselves toward the rest of humanity. It's an exercise in radical empathy, not tactical deceit.
It seems to me that our entire modern education system is kind of fundamentally broken if it ignores this.
Yeah.
I mean, we spend decades sitting in classrooms, mastering calculus, memorizing historical dates.
Mounting the hard sciences, yeah.
Right. And yet, almost zero formal curriculum is dedicated to the mechanics of getting along with the person sitting at the desk next to you.
It's crazy when you think about it.
It is. And Carnegie didn't write this book from an ivory tower either. He didn't just sit in a cabin theorizing about human nature. This entire philosophy was born out of intense practical necessity.
Precisely. The origins of the book are fascinating because it grew organically out of failure and friction.
Like adult education classes in New York, right?
Yeah, around 1912, Carnegie was conducting these adult education courses. And initially, he was just teaching public speaking.
Okay.
He had these night classes filled with weary professionals, accountants, executives, engineers. They just wanted to learn how to stand up and give a presentation without their knees knocking.
Which is a valid skill.
For sure. But as the seasons passed, Carnegie noticed this glaring gap. Sure, these professionals needed to know how to speak on a stage. But what they needed desperately on a daily basis was training in the fine art of getting along with people.
Just everyday business and social contact.
Exactly.
He actually writes that he was appalled at his own frequent lack of finesse and understanding in his earlier years, so he started developing these principles.
And it started incredibly small, didn't it?
Literally just a set of rules printed on a card no larger than a standard postcard. But as his students tested these rules, the postcard grew.
It evolved.
Yeah, it became a larger card, then a leaflet, then a series of booklets, and eventually a lecture that consumed an hour and 30 minutes. He essentially crowdsourced the testing of human behavior.
He called it a laboratory of human relationships. And it's worth pausing to appreciate that. It was the first and only laboratory of human relationships for adults that had ever existed at that time.
Wow, really? The only one?
Yeah. He would give these talks, hand out his principles, and then urge his students to go out into the unforgiving environment of the New York business world.
The ultimate testing ground.
Truly. He told them to test the principles in their offices, test them on their spouses at home, and then come back to the classroom and report on the results. So the book isn't just one man's opinion.
Right. It's the culmination of 15 years of that specific iterative experiment and research. And he didn't just rely on his classes to write it either.
The research he did was intense.
The sheer volume is staggering. He and a trained researcher spent a year and a half in libraries devouring everything they could get their hands on. They read philosophy. They pored over messy family court records.
Just to see why marriages fail, yeah.
Exactly. They read the new psychologists of the era. I mean, they read over 100 biographies of Theodore Roosevelt alone.
Just to reverse engineer how Roosevelt dealt with people.
Oh, yeah. He personally interviewed titans of his era, too. Thomas Edison, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Clark Gable. He was hunting for the universal thread of human connection.
And all of that research leads to what I consider the most staggering statistic in the entire text. This comes from the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about. Lay it on us.
This is the statistic that should completely shatter and rebuild how we view professional development. The investigations revealed that even in highly technical fields, and they specifically looked at engineering, only about 15% of one's financial success is due to technical knowledge.
Just to underscore that for you listening, 15%. Your degree, your certifications, your sheer computing power in your brain, all of that only accounts for 15% of the outcome.
Yes. A massive 85% of financial success is due to skill in human engineering.
85%.
It is due to personality and the ability to lead people. John D. Rockefeller, who obviously amassed one of the greatest fortunes in human history, stated explicitly that the ability to deal with people is as purchasable a commodity as sugar or coffee.
And he said he would pay more for that ability than for any other under the sun, right?
Exactly.
So if you're listening right now and feeling frustrated that you're technically superior to your boss, this is the hard truth. Technical skill is merely the cost of entry. It gets you into the building.
But human engineering is the elevator that determines how high you go.
Perfectly said. And Carnegie recognized that society completely ignores this. He points out a survey conducted by the University of Chicago and the United YMCA schools. They went to Meriden, Connecticut, which they considered a typical American town at the time.
Right, to survey the adults there.
Yeah, to find out what they actually wanted to study in their free time. The number one interest was health, and the second,
It was people.
yes, how to understand them, how to get along with them, how to win others to your way of thinking. Yet, when the researchers looked for a practical textbook on the subject to teach these adults, there wasn't a single one in print. So Carnegie wrote it.
And he wrote it with very specific demands for the reader, which is interesting. He makes it unequivocally clear that reading this book like you would read a mystery novel is a total waste of time.
You can't just passively consume it.
Right, he frames it as an action book. He states that the one indispensable requirement, which is infinitely more important than any specific technique in the chapters, is a deep, driving desire to learn.
He literally commands the reader to read with a crayon or a red pencil or a highlighter in hand, marking up the margins. He insists you must review it every single month.
And he even suggests playing a game where you pay a friend a dime or a dollar every time they catch you violating a rule.
Which is brilliant. Okay, let's unpack this with a sports analogy. You can't learn how to swim just by reading a comprehensive textbook on the biomechanics of the butterfly stroke.
No, of course not.
You can memorize the exact angle your hand needs to enter the water. But the second you jump into the deep end of the pool, your heart rate spikes, your instinct takes over, you panic, and you sink.
Unless you've practiced.
Right. You have to get in the water. Carnegie is saying human relations is exactly the same. You can't just conceptualize it. You have to practice it in the messy, unpredictable reality of the real world until it becomes muscle memory. But this brings up a huge psychological hurdle. When you first start consciously trying to change how you talk to your spouse or how you deliver feedback to your team, it feels incredibly unnatural. It feels awkward. How do we push past that friction?
Well, that awkwardness is completely necessary. It is the literal neurological friction of forming a new, deeply empathetic habit. We can connect this directly to the work of B.F. Skinner.
the famous Harvard psychologist.
Yes, the world-famous psychologist whose work Carnegie actually references. Skinner proved through his conditioning experiments that active learning requires participation and reinforcement. We only retain knowledge that we actively use in our environment.
So the awkward feeling is actually a good sign.
When you feel that awkwardness, you are literally feeling your brain rewiring itself. You are moving away from a lifetime of reactive, ego-driven habits where you just say whatever you feel like saying.
To proactive, other-centric behavior.
Exactly. Carnegie is very candid about this. He acknowledges that it is much easier to find fault than to find praise. It is much more natural to talk about what you want than to try to understand the other person's viewpoint.
So the awkwardness is just the growing pain of attempting to form a completely new way of life.
Precisely.
And that new way of life requires dismantling some of our most deeply ingrained habits. Let's look at the foundational techniques Carnegie lays out. The first 3 principles of the book really set the baseline.
Okay, let's hear them.
Principle 1, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Principle 2, give honest and sincere appreciation. And Principle 3, arouse in the other person an eager want. Let's really dig into that first one.
Avoiding criticism.
Yeah, because avoiding criticism goes against almost everything we're taught in corporate culture today, where, constructive criticism is championed as this ultimate virtue. But Carnegie goes hard against it. He says any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do.
He brings in some heavy historical evidence to demonstrate just how fundamentally destructive criticism is to the human psyche, too.
Yeah, like Thomas Hardy.
Right, Thomas Hardy, one of the finest novelists in English literature, who was driven to give up forever the writing of fiction because of bitter, harsh criticism.
And Thomas Chatterton.
Yes, the brilliant English poet who was literally driven to suicide by the sting of critics. We often delude ourselves into thinking of criticism as a sharp, precise, corrective tool. We think we're performing surgery.
But we're really just doing damage.
Exactly. Carnegie, echoing the great stress researcher and psychologist Hans Selye, reminds us of a core human truth. As much as we thirst for approval, we dread condemnation.
He explicitly states that when we are dealing with people, we must remember we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion. Creatures bristling with prejudices, motivated by intense pride and vanity.
That is such a crucial point.
Right. If you criticize someone, even if you are factually 100% correct, their logic center shuts down, and their emotional defense mechanisms instantly deploy.
They just build a wall.
Exactly. So, if we strip away the tool of criticism, what replaces it? This leads us into Principle 2 and 3, which really form the core psychological engine of the entire book.
Right. Carnegie takes us on a deep dive into the foundational drives of human nature here. He references the theories of Sigmund Freud and John Dewey.
Freud had some interesting theories.
He did. Freud postulated that everything you and I do springs from 2 base motives, the sex urge and the desire to be great.
And Dewey.
Dewey, who was arguably America's most profound philosopher and educator at the time, phrased it slightly differently, but the essence is the same. Dewey said the deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important.
The desire to be important. That's a huge theme.
It is absolutely critical to notice the specific language used here, too. William James, the pioneering Harvard psychologist, didn't call it a wish or a preference or a longing. He called it the craving to be appreciated.
And a craving is a very different biological mechanism than a wish. Like, you wish you had a nicer car, but you crave water when you are dying of thirst. A craving is a survival imperative.
Exactly. It is a psychological hunger. Carnegie notes his profound tragedy in how we live. He says we meticulously feed our children's bodies, our friends' bodies, our employees' bodies. We would never leave them without food for 6 days.
Of course not.
But we routinely go 6 days, 6 weeks, or even 6 years without giving them the kind words of genuine appreciation that would nourish their self-esteem. We literally starve their psychological bodies.
We withhold the very praise that would, as he puts it, sing in their memories for years like the music of the morning stars.
It's beautifully put.
Carnegie makes this grand assertion that this craving for a feeling of importance is the chief distinguishing difference between mankind and the animals. I mean, if our primitive ancestors didn't have this burning, flaming urge, civilization as we know it would be impossible. We'd still be living in caves.
It's the invisible force behind so much of what we do.
It makes you want to wear the latest styles. It makes you want to buy a car that is way too expensive for your budget. And it's what makes you want to talk endlessly about how brilliant your children are.
Oh, definitely.
And he illustrates this psychological drive with a fascinating contrast. He looks at how two wildly different people fulfilled this exact same psychological craving.
The contrast he draws between John D. Rockefeller and the notorious gangster Dillinger is brilliant because it completely removes the moral judgment from the psychological drive.
How so?
Well, Rockefeller secured his feeling of importance by amassing hundreds of millions of dollars and then giving that money away to erect a modern hospital in Peking, China. He wanted to care for millions of impoverished people he had never seen and would never meet. He fed his craving through philanthropy.
Okay, and Dillinger.
Dillinger, on the other hand, the infamous bank robber and murderer, secured his feeling of importance by being labeled public enemy number one.
Oh, wow.
When the FBI was hunting him across the Midwest, he crashed into a farmhouse in Minnesota and proudly announced to the terrified farmers, "I'm Dillinger." He wanted them to know who he was.
That is wild.
It is the exact same fundamental psychological hunger. The mechanism is identical. The only difference is the behavioral avenue they chose to feed it.
Speaking of feeding it, there's a story Carnegie tells about his own childhood that perfectly encapsulates this. He talks about his father out in Missouri.
Oh, the hog ribbons.
Yes. His father bred fine Duroc Jersey hogs and pedigreed white-faced cattle. And they would enter these animals in the country fairs all throughout the Midwest, and they would win first prizes.
Naturally.
His father would take these blue ribbons and pin them onto a large sheet of white muslin. Whenever visitors came over to the house, his father would grab one end of the muslin, Dale would grab the other end, and they would stretch it out to proudly exhibit all these blue ribbons.
That's a great image.
And Carnegie points out the obvious but profound truth. The hogs didn't care about the ribbons they had won. The hogs had no concept of prestige.
They're hogs.
Exactly, but father did. Those physical ribbons gave him a tangible feeling of importance.
It is a perfect encapsulation of the human condition. Every single person you interact with today, the CEO of your company, the barista making your coffee, the driver in the lane next to you, they are all walking around clutching their own invisible sheets of white muslin with their own blue ribbons pinned to it.
I love that.
And all they are hoping for is that someone, anyone, will simply stop, look at it, and acknowledge their importance.
But wait, I have to challenge this premise here. Because if giving appreciation and making people feel important is truly this incredibly powerful, like if it is the ultimate psychological cheat code, then why shouldn't we just flatter everyone?
Ah.
I mean, we all work in environments where we see the absolute kiss-ups, the sycophants getting promoted. If flattery works to inflate someone's ego, shouldn't we just deploy it constantly?
That is the trap, and Carnegie anticipates that exact pushback. He is adamant, almost shouting from the page, "No, no, I am not suggesting flattery. Far from it."
Because it's insincere.
Because while flattery might work in a very short-term, superficial dynamic with someone who has an extraordinarily fragile ego, the general human radar for insincerity is incredibly highly tuned. Flattery inevitably does more harm than good.
People can smell it a mile away.
Exactly. He brings up King George V, who reigned during the First World War. King George had a set of 6 maxims framed and displayed on the walls of his private study at Buckingham Palace. One of those maxims read, "Teach me neither to proffer nor receive cheap praise."
Cheap praise, that's a great definition of flattery.
It really is. Flattery is counterfeit currency. Carnegie defines flattery very specifically. It is telling the other person precisely what they already think about themselves. It requires no effort. It is shallow, it is intensely selfish, and as Carnegie says, it comes from the teeth out.
From the teeth out. Wow.
Genuine appreciation, on the other hand, requires empathy. It comes from the heart out. Flattery is universally condemned. Sincere appreciation is universally admired.
But practically speaking, what does making that shift actually require of us? If I want to stop flattering and start giving genuine appreciation today, what has to change in my daily routine?
Well, it requires a fundamental, staggering shift in your daily cognitive habits. Carnegie points out a very uncomfortable truth about our internal monologues.
Which is,
When we are not deeply engaged in actively thinking about some definite, complex problem, like, say, solving a math equation or fixing an engine, we usually spend about 95% of our time thinking about ourselves.
95%.
We think about our lunch, our commute, our perceived slights, our ambitions. To give honest, sincere appreciation, you have to actively arrest that default programming.
You have to pull yourself out of it.
Yes, you have to consciously stop thinking about yourself for that 95% of the time, step completely out of your own ego, and actively scan the environment to look for the good in the other person.
That sounds exhausting.
That is why it is so difficult. It
Yeah.
isn't a clever conversational script you can memorize. It is a profound reallocation of your raw mental energy toward others.
Which flows seamlessly into the next major theme of the text, the seemingly passive ways we build goodwill. Carnegie outlines 6 ways to make people like you. And at first glance, the rules sound deceptively simple.
Smile, remember a person's name, be a good listener.
Yeah, but when you unpack the psychology behind them, they're incredibly demanding. Take remembering names, for instance. He mentions how Franklin D. Roosevelt, despite bearing the weight of leading a nation through the Great Depression and World War II, made it a point to remember the names of mechanics and staff.
Because FDR knew that to a person, their name is the sweetest and most important sound in any language.
Exactly. But the absolute heavy lifter in this section is Principle 1. Become genuinely interested in other people.
The entire weight of that principle rests on the word genuinely. And Carnegie illustrates this with the ultimate universal winner of friends.
The dog.
The dog. Think about it. When you get within 10 feet of a friendly dog, it begins to wag its tail. If you stop and pat that dog, it almost jumps out of its skin to show you how much it likes you.
So true.
And the psychological comfort of that interaction comes from the fact that we all inherently know that behind the show of affection, there are 0 ulterior motives. The dog doesn't want to sell you a piece of real estate. The dog isn't trying to network with you to get a job in your company. The dog doesn't want to marry you. The dog makes a living entirely by giving you pure, unadulterated affection.
Now compare that to how we, as humans, normally operate in our daily lives. We view almost every interaction as transactional. Carnegie tells this amazing grounding story about standing in line at the post office in New York.
Oh, the hair story.
Yes. He was just waiting to mail a letter, and he noticed the clerk behind the counter. He watched this man weighing envelopes, handing out stamps, making exact change, just enduring this monotonous, soul-crushing grind year after year.
A tough job.
Very. And Carnegie decided in that moment, as a psychological experiment, I'm going to try to make that clerk like me.
And notice the internal dialogue Carnegie has with himself here. He knew that to make the clerk like him, he couldn't talk about herself. He couldn't say, "Look at me, I'm Dale Carnegie, the famous author." Instead, he asked himself, what is there about this man that I can honestly and genuinely admire? He actively paused his 95% self-thought cycle. He scanned the clerk, and he noticed the man had a magnificent head of hair.
Right. So as the clerk is weighing the envelope, Carnegie doesn't make small talk about the weather. He just looks at him and says, I certainly wish I had your head of hair.
The reaction from the clerk is beautiful and profoundly human. The clerk looked up, half startled out of his monotonous trance, and his face suddenly beamed with smiles.
He was probably shocked.
He was. He was modest about it, brushing it off, saying it wasn't as good as it used to be. But Carnegie held his ground and assured him it was still magnificent. They had a brief, joyful exchange.
And Carnegie notes in the book, I'll bet that person went to lunch that day walking on air. I'll bet he went home that night and told his wife about it. I'll bet he looked in the mirror and said, it is a beautiful head of hair.
Such a small gesture, but such a big impact.
And here is the kicker to that story. When Carnegie told that anecdote to his class, someone immediately asked him, what were you trying to get out of the clerk?
What was the angle, right? Yeah.
That was the angle.
Yeah.
And Carnegie was genuinely offended by the question.
Mm-hmm.
He writes that if our souls are so small that we cannot radiate a little passing happiness to another human being without secretly trying to extract something in return, we absolutely deserve the failure that will come to us.
Powerful words.
He wanted something priceless, and he got it. The feeling of having done something for someone without them being able to do anything in return.
That is the unadulterated essence of genuine interest. It expects no ROI. He shares another phenomenal anecdote about attending a dinner party where he was seated next to a prominent woman.
Oh, the bridge party.
Yeah. Carnegie knew going in that she had recently traveled, so he actively suppressed his own desire to speak. He simply asked her about her travels. For 45 minutes, she talked. She talked about Africa, the sights, the experiences.
And what did Carnegie do?
Carnegie barely uttered a word other than the occasional encouraging prompt. At the end of the evening, she told the host and everyone else what a great conversationalist Carnegie was.
But he didn't converse. He just provided a vacuum for her ego.
Exactly. He provided a stage. To be interesting, you must be interested. And Carnegie anchors this concept by quoting the famous Viennese psychologist Alfred Adler.
The author of What Life Should Mean to You.
Right. Adler writes this devastating critique of human behavior. He says, "It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men who has the greatest difficulties in life and provides the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failures spring."
It is a striking, sweeping indictment of self-absorption.
Truly.
So if you're listening to this right now, whether you're commuting, at the gym, or walking the dog, think about the landscape of our modern digital age. We were living in an era where everyone is constantly broadcasting their own lives on social media.
Always post.
Yeah, we are perpetually shouting into the digital void, carefully curating our highlight reels, desperate for likes, retweets, and comments. In a world where everyone is a broadcaster, hasn't the commodity of being a good, active listener become so incredibly rare? It's practically a superpower.
Unquestionably. In a modern economy defined by constant distraction, fragmented attention, and relentless self-promotion, giving someone your unbroken, undivided, genuine attention is the modern equivalent of offering a traveler a psychological oasis in a blistering desert.
A psychological oasis. I love that.
It is the ultimate market differentiator. When you actively listen to someone without looking at your phone, without waiting for your turn to speak, you are non-verbally communicating to their subconscious. You have value. You are important.
And this connects directly to what Carnegie identifies as the all-important law of human conduct, right?
It does. It's a universal law taught by philosophers, prophets, and sages throughout all of recorded history. Zoroaster taught it to his followers in Persia 3,000 years ago. Confucius preached it in China.
Lao Tse, the founder of Taoism, taught it.
Yes. Buddha preached it on the banks of the holy Ganges. Jesus summed it up on a hillside in Judea, the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Meaning,
you want the approval of those you come in contact with. You want recognition of your true worth. You crave a feeling of importance in your little world. Therefore, if you want those things from the world, you must be the one to give them to others first.
it is ancient spiritual wisdom, completely validated by modern behavioral psychology. But, I mean, it's easy to smile and listen to people when things are going well.
Yeah.
It's easy to be interested when someone is talking about a fun vacation.
Sure.
The real test of human engineering is when things break down. What happens when we disagree? What happens when there is fierce conflict, differing opinions, or high stakes?
That's where it gets difficult.
This brings us to Section 4, the most counterintuitive part of Carnegie's entire philosophy, winning people to your way of thinking.
And his rules here are tough to swallow.
Carnegie's principle one for resolving conflict is radical. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it.
Just avoid it entirely.
Yep. Principle 2, never say you're wrong. And principle 3, if you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically.
It sounds incredibly passive, especially in our modern combative culture where destroying someone in a debate or owning them on social media is celebrated as a victory. We view arguments as gladiatorial combat.
But Carnegie learned the fidelity of this the hard way, didn't he?
He did. He tells a story about attending a grand banquet in London given in honor of Sir Ross Smith, the Australian ace pilot. During the dinner, the man sitting next to Carnegie told a humorous story that hinged on a quote, which the man confidently claimed was from the Bible.
Uh-oh. Let me guess, it wasn't.
It wasn't. Carnegie, being well-read, knew for an absolute fact that the quote was from Shakespeare's Hamlet. So purely to show off his own importance and superiority, Carnegie publicly corrected him.
Oh, no. Right there at the banquet.
Yep, the man immediately dug his heels in. From Shakespeare. Impossible. Absurd. That quote is from the Bible. An argument started brewing right there at the table.
How awkward.
Very. The man sitting on Carnegie's other side was an old friend named Frank Gammon, who had devoted years to the study of Shakespeare. Carnegie turned to him for validation, assuming Gammon would back him up.
And did he?
No. Gammon kicked Carnegie under the table, looked at the other man, and said, "You are right, sir. The gentleman is correct. It is from the Bible."
Which is wild, because Gammon knew it was Shakespeare.
Yes. Later, when Carnegie and Gammon were walking home, Carnegie demanded to know why Gammon had lied. Gammon replied, "Of course it was from Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 2. But we were guests at a festive occasion, my dear Dale. Why prove to a man he is wrong?"
Wow.
Gammon said, "Is that going to make him like you? Why not let him save his face? He didn't ask for your opinion. He didn't want it. Why argue with him? Always avoid the acute angle."
Why prove to a man he is wrong?
Yep.
I think it's like a ton of bricks. If your goal is to influence someone, proving your intellectual superiority is the absolute worst strategy.
It backfires every time.
It reminds me of the story of a young Ben Franklin. Today, we think of Benjamin Franklin as this suave, brilliant, universally beloved American diplomat who charmed the French court. But in his youth, Franklin was blundering, arrogant, and aggressively argumentative.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he would just hammer people with his superior logic.
Wow.
Finally, one day, an older Quaker friend took him aside and lashed him with some stinging truths. He essentially told Franklin that his arguments were making him obnoxious.
Ouch.
He told him that his friends found they actually enjoyed themselves better when Franklin wasn't around because he was constantly trying to prove everyone wrong.
That's a harsh reality check.
It is. But Franklin, to his immense credit, was smart enough to realize that this ego-driven path was a one-way ticket to failure and isolation. He completely transformed his approach, literally vowing to speak ill of no man and to speak all the good he knew of everybody.
He suppressed his ego.
Exactly. He stopped arguing and became one of the most effective diplomats in global history.
And we see the exact same destructive dynamic of argumentation play out in modern corporate environments every single day.
Oh, absolutely. Like the yarn plant story.
Yes, consider the story Carnegie shares of Catherine Allred, who worked at a yarn processing plant in North Carolina. She was an industrial engineering supervisor, and her job was to design and implement incentive systems for the workers.
Okay.
She spent months developing a brilliant, mathematically flawless new system. She called a meeting with upper management to present it. She walked into the boardroom, completely confident in her data.
Armed with the facts.
Right. She told management exactly where their old system was flawed. She showed them the mathematical proof of how they were being inefficient, and then she presented her perfect, shiny new solution. And she failed miserably. Management rejected it outright.
Because she walked in and essentially told a room full of executives, "You are all doing this wrong and I am right." She put them instantly on the defensive.
Precisely. The data didn't matter. As she later reflected, she became so busy defending her own position and her own logic that she left management no psychological opening to graciously admit their own problems.
Their egos were bruised, so they rejected the math.
Exactly. So after taking Carnegie's course and realizing her massive misstep, she called another meeting. This time, she didn't bring her perfect solution. She walked in and asked them where they felt their problems were.
She flipped the script.
Yes. She asked for their opinions on the best way to proceed. She guided the conversation, but she let them slowly develop her system themselves, making them feel like it was their idea. And when the final system was presented, they enthusiastically championed and accepted it.
I love that. And another great example of not arguing is the story of Carnegie and the mounted policeman, because it shows how you can completely disarm authority by using these principles.
It's a dog in the park story.
Yes. Carnegie used to take his little Boston Bulldog, Rex, to a park in New York. The dog didn't like wearing a muzzle, and Carnegie didn't like putting it on him, so they would run around without one, which was strictly against the law.
Risky.
Yeah, and one day, a mounted policeman caught them. The cop was fierce. He scolded Carnegie, told him he was breaking the law, and warned him that the next time he caught the dog unmuzzled, he would haul Carnegie into court and fine him.
A very clear warning.
Very clear.
Yeah.
Fast forward a few weeks, Carnegie gets sloppy, lets the dog off the leash, and sure enough, he runs right into the exact same policeman on the exact same horse.
Busted.
But this time, Carnegie didn't wait for the cop to start yelling. He didn't wait to be attacked. He beat the officer to the punch. He rushed forward and immediately started aggressively criticizing himself, apologizing profusely.
He took the blame immediately.
He said he had absolutely no excuses, he had been warned, he was flagrantly guilty, and he deserved to be fined.
And look at the psychological jujitsu that happens next. What did the policeman do? The policeman, like every human being, wanted a feeling of importance.
Right.
When Carnegie began to violently condemn himself, the only way the policeman could maintain his feeling of importance and authority was to take the opposite stance, to be magnanimous, merciful, and forgiving. He actually started making excuses for Carnegie.
Really? The cop made excuses for him.
Yes. He said, "Well, I know it's a temptation to let a little dog like that have a run when there's nobody around." He ended up letting Carnegie off with a gentle warning.
That's amazing.
If Carnegie had argued, if he had said, "But officer, there's no one around, he's a small dog, he won't bite anyone," the cop's authority would have been challenged, and Carnegie would have been heavily fined. By taking the other person's side, he completely disarmed the conflict.
Okay, let's unpack this. Trying to argue someone down with pure logic is like standing on the train tracks trying to stop a speeding locomotive by pushing against it with your bare hand.
Pushing against it, yeah.
Yeah. You'll just get crushed. The physics just don't work. The harder you push, the harder they will hit you. Carnegie is saying that if you want to change the train's direction, you have to jump on the train while it's moving.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You have to walk up to the engine room, stand shoulder to shoulder with the conductor, look out the window at the exact same view they are seeing, validate their perspective, and then, only then, can you slowly apply the brakes together.
That is a phenomenal, highly accurate metaphor for the psychological mechanism at play. And in terms of neurobiology, the engine room of that train is what Carnegie calls the yes-yes response.
Yes response. He calls it the secret of Socrates.
Oh, yeah. Yes. When you are talking with someone, especially in a negotiation or a conflict, you must never, ever begin by discussing the things on which you differ.
You have to find common ground first.
You must begin by emphasizing and continuously emphasizing the things on which you agree. You want to get the other person saying yes, yes at the outset. You must keep them, if possible, from uttering the word no.
Because no is so powerful.
Because psychologically and physiologically, when a person says no, their entire neuromuscular system goes into lockdown. Their glandular, nervous, and muscular tissues gather themselves together into a condition of literal rejection.
Like a physical bracing.
Yes, the pupils dilate, cortisol begins to spike, the body literally braces for physical combat just from a verbal disagreement. The whole organism goes on the defensive.
And conversely, when you get them saying yes.
When a person says yes, none of the withdrawal activities take place. The organism is in a forward-moving, accepting, open attitude. The more yeses you can capture at the outset, the more likely you are to succeed in capturing the attention for your ultimate proposal.
So jumping on the train with them.
If you can get them aligning with you on small agreements first, it's infinitely easier to slowly steer them toward your main conclusion.
And we have to deeply understand what is at stake when we tell someone they are wrong. When you tell a coworker, your data is wrong, what are you actually doing to them? You aren't just attacking a spreadsheet.
No, you are attacking their intelligence. You are attacking their judgment, their pride, and their self-esteem. We must realize that to the other person, their perspective feels 100% justified, no matter how objectively wrong it might be to an outside observer.
Even if they are completely mistaken.
Carnegie illustrates this beautifully by reminding us of Al Capone.
America's most notorious public enemy.
Exactly. Al Capone didn't view himself as a murderous monster. Capone honestly thought of himself as an unappreciated public benefactor.
Wait, really? A benefactor?
Yes. He thought he was doing the public a service by supplying them with alcohol during Prohibition, and he felt victimized by the government.
That is profound delusion.
It is, but think about the implications. If Al Capone, a literal mob boss, feels completely justified in his actions, how do you think the guy in your accounting department feels about his spreadsheet error?
To him, he is totally justified.
Completely. He was tired, the software's clunky, the deadline was unreasonable. If you attack the error head-on, you attack his ego.
Which brings us to the ultimate magic phrase Carnegie offers to stop arguments before they start and create instant goodwill. The phrase is, I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
That phrase is pure gold.
And the absolute beauty of this phrase is that it is 100% true. Because if you had their exact temperament, their exact environment, their exact upbringing, and their exact stresses, you would feel exactly as they do. As the saying goes, the only reason you aren't a rattlesnake is that your parents weren't rattlesnakes.
That phrase acts as a base to neutralize the acid of hard feelings. It immediately diffuses the neuromuscular defense system. And once you have diffused that defense system, it opens the door to actual constructive leadership. Which brings us to the final major theme of our deep dive.
Yes, Section 5 of Carnegie's framework, be a leader. Because the reality of life and business is that people do mess up. Things do need to be corrected. You can't just run a company or raise a family on pure praise if the building is burning down.
Exactly. You have to be able to guide people.
So how do you correct a subordinate, discipline a child, or address a failing partner without making them resent you? Carnegie outlines several principles here. Call attention to mistakes indirectly. Let the other person save face. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest.
Those are all crucial.
And there's one incredibly tactical trick in this section that I want to highlight because it completely changes the grammar of criticism.
Oh, you mean the but, versus, and transition?
Yes. This is a brilliant linguistic adjustment. Many well-meaning leaders or parents begin a necessary criticism with sincere praise, but then they immediately follow it with the word but and end with a critical statement.
Like a compliment sandwich.
Right, so a parent might say, Johnny, we're really proud of you for raising your grades this term, but your algebra needs work.
And the absolute second Johnny hears the word but, everything that preceded it is erased.
It's just gone.
He questions the sincerity of the original praise. It feels like a manipulative trap. The praise was just the spoonful of sugar to hide the medicine of the criticism.
Exactly. It destroys trust. Carnegie suggests simply changing that one three-letter word to and. Let's replay the sentence. We're really proud of you, Johnny, for raising your grades this term. And by continuing that same conscientious effort next term, your algebra grade can be right up there with all the others.
It's amazing. It completely rewires the psychology of the interaction. Now Johnny fully accepts the praise because there is no sudden pivot. There's no inference of failure.
You've indirectly called his attention to the exact behavior you want him to change. You've given him a reputation to live up to. This principle applies everywhere, from modern UX design, where apps gently nudge users toward better habits, to corporate 360-degree feedback reviews. You never want to corner someone.
And that connects deeply to the principle of letting someone save face. The story Carnegie shares about General Electric is a masterclass in executive diplomacy.
Oh, Charles Steinmetz. Let's talk about him.
Charles Steinmetz was a literal genius working at General Electric. He was indispensable to their electrical innovations. However, he was failing miserably as the head of the calculating department.
Brilliant engineer, terrible manager.
Exactly. He lacked the administrative skills, and he was highly temperamental. GE's leadership knew they couldn't just fire him, they needed his genius, but they also couldn't bluntly demote him without risking a massive ego blow-up that might cause him to quit and go to a competitor.
So what did they do?
They engaged in brilliant human engineering. They gave him a brand new, highly prestigious title. They made him the consulting engineer of the General Electric Company.
Which is basically a made-up title, right?
It was essentially a new title for the technical work he was already doing, but the fanfare allowed them to quietly put someone else in charge of the calculating department. Steinmetz was thrilled with the honor, the executives were relieved to have a real manager in the department, and they maneuvered their most temperamental star without a single storm. They did it entirely by letting him save face.
We so often ride roughshod over the feelings of others. We issue threats, we criticize employees in front of their peers, we mandate sweeping changes without consulting the team. Carnegie asks a fundamental question of leadership. Why don't we use meat instead of a whip? Why don't we use praise instead of condemnation?
It's so much more effective.
He tells the story of a teacher whose student had illegally parked his car, completely blocking a necessary driveway. Another instructor at the school stormed into the classroom completely enraged and screamed in front of everyone, "Whose car is blocking the driveway? Move that car right now or I'll wrap a chain around it and drag it out myself."
That's intense.
Now, the student did move the car, but he deeply resented that instructor for the rest of his time at the school, and so did every other student in the room. A brash, humiliating order creates instant, lasting rebellion.
Contrast that approach with the B.F. Skinner concept of positive reinforcement we discussed earlier. The psychologist JustListen put it beautifully. Praise is like sunlight to the warm human spirit. We cannot flower and grow without it.
Like sunlight?
When we praise even the slightest improvement, we act like sunlight. It reinforces the good behavior, makes the person want to continue improving, and naturally lets the poorer habits atrophy simply for lack of attention. We spend so much energy policing bad behavior when praising good behavior is infinitely more efficient.
But let me play devil's advocate here, because this is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of managers. What about assigning tasks that people just inherently do not want to do? Scrubbing toilets, doing inventory, filing TPS reports.
The grunt work?
Yeah, the grunt work. Carnegie talks about a manager who needed a stockroom cleaned out. He could have just walked up to his employee, John, and ordered him, sweep the floor, pile the stock neatly, polish the counter. It's John's job, right? He gets a paycheck to do what he's told.
He does get a paycheck, but a leader's job is to elicit cooperation, not just compliance. Compliance breeds resentment. Cooperation breeds ownership.
So how do you get cooperation for cleaning a stockroom?
To get cooperation, you must employ radical empathy. You have to ask yourself what the other person really wants. You must align the tedious task with a larger benefit that they actually care about.
Okay, what was John's benefit?
In this specific case, the manager knew that John took immense pride in the stockroom's appearance and the overall company image. So the manager framed the tedious task through that lens. He said, John, I am bringing some important customers in tomorrow to show our facilities. I would love to show them your stockroom, but it's in poor shape right now. If you could sweep it out and polish the counter, it would make us look incredibly efficient, and you will have done your part to provide a stellar company image.
Okay, but imagine I'm a manager listening to this, and I'm thinking, that's great for John, but the guy I manage doesn't care about the company image. He doesn't care about our lofty corporate mission statement. He literally just wants to collect his hourly wage and clock out exactly at 5 p.m.
A very common scenario.
Right. How do you use human engineering on someone whose motives are entirely self-serving in that way?
That is the ultimate test of Carnegie's principles, and it points right back to Principle 3, arouse an eager want. You cannot force them to care about the corporate mission. If they only care about their paycheck and getting out the door at 5 p.m., then you must frame the request entirely in terms of that specific desire.
You make it about their 5 p.m. goal.
Exactly. You don't talk about the company image. You say, John, if we don't get this stockroom organized today, it's going to make our Friday inventory count a nightmare, and we'll probably be stuck here until 6 p.m. But if we can knock out the sweeping and organizing right now, it's going to save you 45 minutes of counting on Friday, meaning you can walk out that door exactly at 5 p.m. without any stress.
Ah, I see.
You must aggressively figure out what they want. You match the benefits of the task to the other person's wants. It's never about what you want. It's always, always about what they want.
It's about finding their specific flavor of blue ribbon and hanging it on their muslin.
That's a great way to put it.
As we pull back and synthesize this massive deep dive into Carnegie's work, it becomes so incredibly clear why this book has survived for nearly a century. It is not a bag of cheap interpersonal tricks. You cannot just slap a fake smile on your face, memorize a few names, drop a few compliments, and manipulate your way to the corner office. People will see right through you.
Absolutely.
What Carnegie is demanding is a profound, exhausting, and ultimately beautiful shift in your entire worldview. He's asking you to step out of your own ego, to stop the relentless cycle of thinking about yourself 95% of the time.
And to actively, intentionally view the world through the eyes of the people you interact with daily.
It requires immense daily patience. It requires the active conscious suppression of your own ego. It requires the supreme courage to give genuine appreciation, even when your primal instinct is screaming at you to criticize, condemn, and prove that you are right.
It is, as Carnegie titled one of his chapters, a completely new way of life.
A completely new way of life. And if you ever find yourself doubting the value of making this difficult shift, just remember that staggering piece of data. 85% of your financial, professional, and I would argue personal success depends on mastering these emotional skills. Your technical knowledge, your IQ, your degrees, those are just the baseline.
They are the cost of entry, but human engineering is the ceiling.
As we close out today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. It builds on everything we've talked about, and it draws from the great Harvard psychologist William James, whom Carnegie quotes toward the end of the book.
James wrote this incredibly haunting observation about the human condition. He said, compared with what we ought to be, we are only half awake. Our fires are damped, our drafts are checked. We are making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources. The human individual lives far within his limits. He possesses powers of various sorts which he habitually fails to use.
We spend thousands of hours and thousands of dollars optimizing our lives. We upgrade our software, we dial in our macros and diets, we micromanage our calendars, and we take supplements to squeeze out a 1% increase in our productivity.
We really do.
But what if the most powerful, vastly underutilized resource in your life right now requires no technology at all? What if it is simply your inherent magic ability to lavish genuine, heartfelt praise on the people around you?
It's right there waiting to be used.
What hidden potential in your spouse, your children, your frustrating coworker, or even a tired stranger working at the post office could you awaken today just by pausing for 10 seconds to make them feel important? Next time you look at a frustrating interpersonal situation and you expect the clean, binary, measurable precision of a medical x-ray or a line of code, remember, you're dealing with a human being. Put away the x-ray, put away the criticism, and try a little sunlight instead.